Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast. This is David Waldas here with Nick Musica. Our topic today, how to put away your sword. And Nick and I were just chatting and got into all kinds of conversations about our lives, as we always do. And they were like, oh, we better come up with a topic for our podcast today. And, we were kind of running through some stuff we've been talking about, and it just wasn't resonating. And so I got this really clever idea to stop, tap in, and ask for guidance. And what I was shown was the idea of sheathing our sword. The idea of, a lot of us, particularly those of us that are sensitive, have felt like we've need to navigate the world as warriors. And those of us that are, in that high performance place of like really wanting to make a big impact, really wanting to get whatever's in us out into the world to create transformation, male or female, like we tend to be warriors in it. Not always, but even if it's just a smaller element of you, that idea of I need to go fight the world as if there's something out there resisting us, as if there's something out there trying to hold us back that we need to break through, that we need to overcome, versus the idea of really settling into our power. When we're talking about kingship or queenship, the idea of I'm really clear about who I am, I'm really clear about what I offer, I'm really clear about how I show up. And it's not about me battling something else that I perceive as resisting me bringing myself or my energy or my mission to the world. It's about me bringing myself, my energy, and my mission to the world. And that comes from our core out. It's interesting. We've talked about the threshold too, of being above that threshold where we're in our alignment, or below the threshold where we're not. And that place where we align our will with the organizing energy of the universe above the threshold, right? That's all forward movement. That's that king energy. Aligning ourselves with our ego and being below the threshold and fighting against everything, that's that warrior energy. And we need that component in us. We need to be able to hold our power. But when that is our go-to, when that is, fighting for our purpose as opposed to holding our purpose, it changes our dynamics of everything. It changes the way we're received. It changes the way people interact with us. It changes the way we look at the world. And so, yeah, that's our topic today. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
David. Great.
Did I just change the topic a bit? It's funny because we were talking about what are we going to talk about? And I'm like, oh, let me do the intro. And then you're like, what the hell are we talking about?
I think it's on topic. I think it's what we agreed to 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
As you were chatting, I was just imagining where does that, the old, salvaging any old piece of those old things that used to, the warrior, for example, because there's sometimes we need to grab some pieces of the past and bring them forward, but without that emotional charge. But there was traits that are helpful.
Yeah.
It's putting away this sword, but not necessarily the warrior spirit. One has to come out to play sometimes, because there's a motivating factor in there. There's a pushing through some things that may be obstacles, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah. It's funny. It reminds me of, I was just seeing this vision. This was probably, I don't even know, 15, 20 years ago. I had done a shamanic journeying where I went, where they drum and it puts you into altered state of consciousness. And then you go into the earth and you have calling a power animal, and the power animal takes you on this journey. And, I actually used to teach that for a long time too. But when I was first being introduced to this, I went to this woman who did the shamanic work. And in that journey, it was either hawk or eagle showed up. And the first thing that they did was showed me their talons. And they said, these talons, you have talons too, but we don't need to use them. We just very often, if it's time to eat, use them for that, but we don't need to use them very often to defend ourselves. We just simply need to have them. And by having them, by brandishing them, by having that aspect of ourselves alive and present with us, it doesn't need to be utilized. And so like this feels very much that same energy. Like, what is the warrior energy? The warrior energy is a capability. The warrior energy is a stability inside of us that can handle itself, that isn't going to get pushed around, that, can take action if needed. And once that's present, it doesn't need to take action, or very seldom. It's a very rare occurrence. But when we go, I'm in my warrior, we're out looking for skirmishes. We're out looking for battles to fight. We're out looking for opposition, as opposed to claiming our kingdom or queendom, bringing that energy, being really clear about who we are, not fighting the border skirmishes, but maintaining order and peace in our kingdom, in our queendom.
Yeah.
And when we do that, it's a whole different energy, because now we're organized. Now there's a structure to it. We're not out just looking for anybody that's in opposition to us to go set shit straight. Like, shit is already set straight. That's how shit is, because this is how I am, and I'm stabilized. And if it gets sideways, I can handle myself, but I'm not out handling everybody else. I'm stabilizing myself.
Yeah. So capacities, competencies, but not the operating system of, is what I'm hearing. It's available if you need it.
It's
But it
interesting.
doesn't lead
We
to
often
charge.
use a Harrison preference inventory, which is if you haven't heard us talk about it before, it's basically a instrument for how we behave based on what we prefer and don't prefer. And one of the things that we look at in there is our extremes, like something that's like a high 9 score is something that we just can't help but do, right? And so if somebody has like a high 9 score for like warmth and empathy, like they just have to use that. If they have one for blunt, not bluntness, but what's the other term on their own? Frankness, right? Like they just can't not be frank. Like it's just the obvious thing if it's available. And so we end up being a bit lopsided. And if our warrior energy is always trying to prove itself, is our go-to, like there is no shortage of battles in this world. And I know, because my warrior energy was a 9-10, it was like this world needs to be corrected, this world needs some resetting. And fighting border skirmishes all the time versus going like, well, what if I just bring it all back in, stabilize it inside myself, and actually have that be my peaceful kingdom? And that's very different. And having the capacity to step up when needed a lot makes it so it's such a rare occurrence.
Yeah. That's such a fun way to think about these archetypes, because there's life themes in the Harrison. Like there's 5 behaviors that really drive who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, I was a 9 in a warrior, on a scale of 2 to 10. 10 being
9. Yeah.
my preference. And there's different blocks in the Harrison for life themes, and strongly preferred, and then acceptable areas, and then I choose not to do these things, right? Different labels.
And then the avoidant aspect, right? If your warrior is like, a 2, right? And you're like, anything I can do to not have to be the warrior, like I'll do that. And so then we end up avoiding it. And again, now we don't have a kingdom, because it's just belongs to everybody else, because we don't know how to defend it, how to hold our own.
The opposite scale is closer to 10 is an attachment, and the closer to 2 is an avoidance.
Yeah, overuse and avoidance are the 2, right? Yeah.
Right.
And so, those classic 4 archetypes, and if you've ever read that book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, it's an old book, but it's so good. And, when I think about like the archetype of the warrior, absolutely, that was my 9-10. The magician, of course, like that's part of me. And then the magician or the lover, you think of like the poet, the kind of floaty, the one that's in the flow of things and emotional. Like those were all, very familiar places for me. And I avoided the king energy because I looked out in the world from my warrior perspective and said, it's a mess out there. I do not want to be in charge of that world. I'd rather fight that world. And that was a misperception, because when we're the king, we're not out in the world of chaos. We're creating a kingdom that is not chaos if we're doing the king in a healthy way. I mean, some people claim the kingdom in their trauma, right? Because that's where, their king is a 9-10, but they haven't resolved all this other stuff. And so the kingdom that they hold very clearly and very strongly is a kingdom of chaos. It's a tyrant leader. But when we've when we've learned to stabilize that, then we can go, oh, like, yes, it's so important that I have this warrior energy. I'm so glad I do, but I don't need to lead with it. It needs to
That's it.
actually be in reserve for when necessary. And it needs to be self-evident so that my kingdom is secure, but it does not need to be exercised.
Yeah. I was just imagining the king at a score of 9 and warrior at a score of 9, and that create tyrant?
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah,
Maybe.
absolutely, right? I have to be in charge, and I'm going to do it. But if my magician and my lover scores are lower, then it's like, yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating to look at it through that lens
Yeah.
of the. It'd be fun to create some graphs of that, right?
Yeah, it would. And all the behaviors each one of those brings in.
Yeah,
Super
super
fun.
relevant. And so when you're looking at your own life, like if people are listening, it's a really interesting piece of how much do I feel like I'm bringing stability to my world and everything around it? How much do I feel like I'm out battling it? How much do I feel like I'm in this
Mm.
dreamy, lover energy? And how much do I feel like I'm in this magician where and the magician, of course, like I even have a tattoo of the magician card on my arm, right? It's like I've often seen myself that way is the ability to bring through and channel, like, of course. But again, if you can't hold it and stabilize it, what good is that? And if you can't have that warrior that's strong enough inside you that it's going to defend the borders, meaning simply by going, yeah, don't mess with that. And when I think about it, it's funny when I'm places that are a little sketchy and I'm walking around, that idea of, I need to, like, that warrior energy needs to be present because now I know I'm not a mark, right? And if somebody's looking for a mark, somebody to mug or to whatever, like, they're scanning people and going, not that person, not that person, not that. There's my mark. And, there's something there about when we hold our energy, even if we have this huge kingdom that could be really alluring to people that are looking for a kingdom to take over or something to topple or something to bring their warrior energy to. Like, our warrior energy has to be strong enough to make us not the mark, to make us not the person that's going to be attacked. But just by having that, it's, I guess you could say, it's like what has happened with the nuclear weapons. It's like the safety of everybody, the assured destruction that would happen keeps people from exercising it. Like, it wouldn't work out well for me, and so I'm not doing this. And you know that sounds kind of dark, but it doesn't have to be dark. It's simply an energy you're holding inside yourself that says, yeah, I'm very in touch with my warrior, and my sword can stay in its sheath, but it can be drawn out if needed.
Available. Also not the first go-to.
No, 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 absolutely. And it's self-evident, right? Well, you don't look at any other country that has nuclear weapons and go, like, we're very aware when we're interacting with them that they have capabilities that could, and who doesn't, right? And
Mhm.
those countries are negotiated with very differently.
Mhm. That's true. We can see it happening today.
Yeah. And so, what does that look like inside of us? And it doesn't need to even be a battle. It doesn't need to be something that's moving around or we're conscious of. It's about developing the wholeness of self and healing our overuse of old, archetypes in this case, and healing the underuse. And my king was an avoidant, right? Like, I'm like, I don't want to be in charge of this. Like, I want to just go live my life, and I want to walk around as a warrior. And if anybody messes with me, I can take care of it. But I have no interest in being a kingdom. But because I have no kingdom, I'm always, where am I?
Mm.
You know? And so without that stability, without that sense of, oh, I actually want to be really in charge of what I'm creating and the stabilization of that, now there's something for all the pieces to fit together. Because a
Yeah.
warrior that doesn't have a kingdom, they're just always on somebody else's land, and there's nothing they've claimed.
It sounds like a way more productive way of organizing yourself and moving through things.
Yeah, yeah. And if we've claimed a warrior or a kingdom without a warrior aspect of ourselves, we're always trying to get everybody else to defend us, or we're becoming the victim, or we're playing all these
Oh,
other games
interesting.
to get other people to hold our kingdom or to not touch us, or we sue people, or whatever we do because we think we deserve something that we don't know how to hold. And so we do it through, you know, questionable means. And
So
that's why these
the
four archetypes fit
balance,
together so well, is they're all necessary.
yeah, each and every one, and then the awareness of
Mm-hmm.
who's at play at any point in time, and for what reasons are they, and the imbalances of one over the other when they show up. If we
Yeah.
tend to lean on
Yeah.
one more than the other,
Yeah. And I think that is the irony. Like the warrior is the one that most needs to be self-evident and least exercised. And that's a really interesting thing too, especially for those of us that felt like we didn't have a kingdom. And so our warrior energy was, our go-to. And that was
yeah.
mine.
What's this is a book, yes, that has these.
Warrior King Magician Lover. Yeah, it's a classic book. It's from the 90s. Or around, and it's written, I think, for men, but I think it's really applicable for women as well. As part of that, as Robert Bly, he didn't write it, but it's like that time when like Iron John was coming out in the early 90s, and all that men's movement was starting, of just getting in touch with our role here. And there's a lot of it that's still very applicable, probably more so than ever, actually, because we live in a world where people are not taught to create their own kingdom. They're taught to fight over scraps.
Yeah,
And how do we do that? By having emotional needs that are overwhelming, by, you know, being upset, by being offended, by all these things. And then nobody's in charge because we're just all upset about everything. And what does a warrior energy look like that doesn't know how to hold its power? Like it becomes, a terrorist. It flips the table at Thanksgiving. It
yeah.
does passive aggressive things. It starts fights. It tells on people. It reports people. It's the Karen. It's all those things.
So we just watched Daddy's Home #2 last night. Have you seen this?
I haven't, but I mean, I think that talk about king energy, right? Like, but he's also like his mixture of king and warrior. And I've only seen the first one, but Mark Wahlberg, it just cracks me up. Like, I love watching how he holds his king energy and how quickly he'll flip to warrior.
Yeah,
But he often doesn't have to flip to warrior because his king energy is so strong. But it's also so toxic in the way that he does those things in those
yeah,
movies that makes it
right.
hilarious. But it's so
Yeah,
fun to watch him. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and so that it's sort of the manifestation of these archetypes that you're talking about, and in Daddy too. And so it's Will Ferrell. So it's basically Will Ferrell as the oversensitive dad, and then you have
Yeah,
Mark
yeah.
Wahlberg
Who's the
as
lover?
the
And yeah,
yeah, and Mark Wahlberg is this just like rough and I'm just gonna take what I want, dad.
yeah.
And if
Warrior
it's not
King.
right, I'm
Yeah,
I'm just gonna beat you up, type of thing.
yeah,
And they have to figure the shit out, have to figure it out between themselves because there's kids involved. And so you start to see those behaviors starting to bleed off one into the other. And then there's a new dynamic that comes in Daddy #2, which is Mel Gibson, who is Mark Wahlberg's dad, and
that's fun. That's well cast. Yeah.
he
Some
comes down
Braveheart
this
comes in.
escalator.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and even rougher and even more poking fun at the situations.
yeah.
And Will Ferrell's
And probably
dad
doing the
comes
same thing to
through.
Mark Wahlberg that
That's right.
Mark did to Will. Yeah,
Yeah, and so you just
knocks
see
the
this
power out of
this
him.
different level, this more extreme version of who are now the sons, right?
Even more
Slash the
toxic.
dads.
Yeah.
Yeah, more toxic and more
And then you
soft
see
and
the
like
origin of where it all came from, and then you have compassion
yeah.
for him and all that. Yep. I
And it
can
all
feel it
sort of
all.
gets mixed up in this big stew and in the movie theater, everyone's just involved and all the traits are coming out and it's just a
That
mess
sounds
and
great.
everyone's under pressure. Yeah, but it's the cliff notes, if you would, to the
Yeah.
book you're talking.
Yeah, exactly. It's a humorous version of it, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and either one
yeah,
you go,
yeah,
that doesn't work. Also that works. That doesn't work.
yeah,
Also that works. But it's just too
yeah,
too extreme.
yeah, yeah. And so the value of us talking about all this, right, too, as we kind of pull it all back together today, and is really for us to look at these aspects of ourselves and go, what am I leading with? What am I overusing? And anything that gets
Yeah.
overused gets out of whack. And we tend to, just like in the Harrison, we undervalue what we consider to be the opposite, right? And so the king probably undervalues the lover, right?
Mhm.
Which is like that sensitive part, the soft, like Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, right? Like, of course they look at each other as through the lens of there's something wrong with you. And what does it look like when it comes into balance? What does it look like when we have both? And how well that can work, and how imperative it is for healthiness, and to be a warrior without being a king, but to be a king without being able to hold your kingdom. Like, how do you do it? You become a tyrant. You undermine people. You become a victim. Like, and how do you be a king and a victim at the same time? Like, well, you're just always making anything anybody steps into your kingdom with, this attack on you, and that, everybody needs to get involved. It's how people got canceled for that whole movement of, right? Like, it's all, none of it's being responsible for ourselves. And yeah, I feel like this is just the edge of that conversation. And it's a key part of what we do with aligned living, because that has to stabilize inside of us. And if we don't have that stabilized sense of self and the ability to hold true to it, and the ability to inside of our kingdom access all these other parts of ourselves and hold that energy unmistakably, none of it works. And so that's why it's a system. That's why it all fits together. That's why all the pieces matter. Because just being a king without being able to be a warrior, or without being able to be a magician, without being able to be a lover, or any of them in isolation, doesn't work. And of course,
All
we
the
have our
pieces
natural
matter.
go-tos, but it doesn't work if we don't develop the other aspects of ourselves and value them.
Yeah, and bring them out to play when it's time for them to come out to play.
Yeah, awesome.
Well,
Well, thanks so much for listening, and hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Ours was yesterday, and thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you all next week. Hope this was food for thought, if you're still hungry. All right, have a good one. We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, and if you did, please subscribe so you can catch the next episode. If you want to learn more about the Aligned Living System and how it could support you in your life, check out davidwaldas.com.